Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So I'm going to be doing some deep dive book reviews over the next little while. So I had recently done a Scooby-Doo readathon that had been hosted by Simone at Simone and I, and was co-hosted by Clint from Reed's Readers and Emily at Novel Novels. And I had gone through 7 different books to complete the readathon and all the different prompts that went with it, and I had done brief overviews of each one of the books. So going forward now, if you're interested in a subtler, simple overview, no spoils, I would highly recommend you going back and going through the videos that I have up already. For those of you who are more interested in a more deep dive, thorough thoughts and opinions on the books that I'm going to go over, stay tuned, and I will be gradually going through each one of the books over time. So the first one I'm going to start with is Practical Magic. So um, Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. So I have not read, apparently there is a prequel to this one called Rules of Magic by the same author, and I have not read it yet. So this opinion is going strictly based on this book and, of course, the movie that I've watched multiple times. The movie itself, actresses Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock, along with a few others. This story follows basically a family of witches and the story that goes in behind that. So right off the bat, I have to say that I was introduced to the movie long before I knew about the book. You know, it's kind of one of those, you were zipping through Netflix looking for something to watch, and I had stumbled across it and thought it was interesting. So I had watched it, fell in love with it, and then just within the last month, I discovered that it was actually a book. So I decided to backtrack and give that a shot. So I can honestly say that after reading the book and comparing it to the movie, I was actually a little disappointed in the book, not so much the movie. In this case, I prefer the movie to the book. Um, Reading the book, so going from the beginning, in the movie, it follows, the two little girls, which is consistent with the book, and it's Jillian and Sally, and the two are orphaned at a very young age. Their father is killed, and then their mother basically ends up dying from heartbreak because the husband is gone. So the kids end up being orphaned at a very young age, and they end up going and living with their aunts. Now, these aunts live in a small town, and the town is widely known for the aunts to be very odd and different. And the fact that they're witches is both rumored and known at the same time. And the speciality, although it can range to a lot of different things, the biggest thing that they're known for is having random women show up at their back door requiring help within the love affair situation. Everything from love potions and stealing other husbands or stealing husbands from other wives, and all the drama that goes with that. And that's what these witches are fairly well known for. And so the girls grow up watching what the aunts go through and what these other women go through, and they develop their own opinions and thoughts based on everything they see. So in the movie, it is all condensed in a very small amount of time. So the time moves fairly quickly in here. It shows them as girls, and eventually it shows them as teens, and then it goes a little bit older fairly quickly, and it kind of gets to the point. So in the book, everything has been dragged out significantly. The time frame in the movie is just dramatically shorter compared to the book. The book goes over a course of like years, and it goes over that time frame. And comparing the two, so again, both kids are orphaned, and then they end up in a small town, and with all that entails, and the kids are made fun of all the time. So the kids, all they ever wish is to be normal and to be left alone and to fit in and not be the laughing stock and always picked on and assume that as soon as something goes wrong, they're to blame. everything from bad luck to an accident to a non-accident, it gets somehow twisted that it's their fault. And so Jillian, more so than Sally, just wants to get out of the town, where Sally just wants to be normal and fit right in, where a lot of kids do at that age. It's just, in this case, a bit more difficult because of the family history that surrounds her and her family. So, or the stories that surrounds them. So, with that said, in the movie they go from, like I said, being kids, and as kids, and this is where there's a lot of discrepancies between the two. And the biggest reason why I was disappointed with the book rather, is because in the movie, I'm a sucker for history. One of the things that drives me to watching or reading a story about witches or vampires or Van Helsing or Dracula or any of the legendary myths, so to speak, and not just them, going into the Egyptian gods and goddesses and all the stories. What drives me most is the history and the story behind the why, the what, the who, the how. Because there's always a story, and with witches especially, 95% of the time I find that the story always stems back somehow in some form back to the Salem witch trials. And while they all stem from there, all the stories are all significantly different. And they all end up in their own path, their own story, their own know-how. So it's interesting to see how it all comes out of that. And in the movie, there's a curse on the family name, and the Owens witches is what they're referred to, or the Owens women rather is what they're referred to. And there's, a curse that goes with that any man they fall in love with dies. And so the girls believe that their mother died from a broken heart because their dad was taken from them way too early. And so the girls end up vowing never to fall in love, and then it's this whole thing, and the curse in the story gets explained in the movie. There's more detail behind it, and there's a lot of what influences their actions, their choices, and some of the situations revolve around that story. So when I found out that there was a book, I had thought maybe they would dive more into that. So I haven't read the prequel, so I don't know how much of that history is based out of that, and I'm hoping that there is some basis to it there. But the book itself basically barely touched on it. There were, as I listened to it through audiobook, I'd say a grand total of like 5 minutes. It kind of touched on the story, and then that was it. There was a whole thing about the Death Watch beetle, which is tied to a curse and the death of, the women's other halves. And once you hear that Death Watch beetle, the ticking sound of it, it's supposed to signify that basically your time is up and that death is coming for you. It's around the corner, and then as soon as it stops ticking, somehow, some way, that person is now officially dead. So again, in the movie they explain all that, whereas in the book it was like a 2-second thing. It was, this is what it is in the end. There was no real deep dive. There was no real history as to why or what. And that's what I was looking forward to the most. And this book fell short for me in that way. There wasn't really any history or story. It was just kind of, this is what's going on and this is why, but there wasn't really any backstory to it. So in the book, everything is drawn out significantly more. And while that can be a good thing, I kind of think it was drawn out too much. I don't mind some changes when it comes to book to story, or book to movie rather. For example, one of the biggest things that they obsessed over in the movie was the fact that roses growing overnight was a significance of a bad thing, was a bad omen. And in the book it was lilacs, not roses. So I don't mind small changes like that, but big ones kind of irk me a little bit. So in the movie, you know, the story, once you get past the kids being young and growing up and getting a little bit more into the meat of the story, the basis and the point of the whole thing is that Jillian is the rebellious one. She's the wild child of the two of them. And she ends up leaving home, and then she ends up coming home in trouble. And by trouble, most people would think she comes home pregnant, when in this case it's far from the truth. She ends up getting involved with a guy, and he turns out to be a serial killer of sorts. Of course, she didn't know that at the time, but she ends up finding out that he is some kind of very bad person. He's a bit of a killer and has killed many people before, and he brands them and all these kinds of things. And because she didn't like what she was seeing, she slowly ends up dosing him with something called Amidala. In the book, it's called something else. In the movie, that's what it's called, and it's basically just a sedative used in teas. It's supposed to help calm and sleep and good for the nerves. So she ends up slowly poisoning him with that in his alcohol of choice, which happens to be tequila, based on the movie. And the movie focuses primarily around that event. She comes home, she's in trouble, and she kind of accidentally murders him. He basically just drops dead. And rather than going to the aunts for help, which would have been the smart thing to do, she goes home and she seeks out her sister, and the two of them bury him in the backyard and just try and forget about it. And then all of a sudden these roses grow overnight, and like I said, it ends up growing over top of the grave, and it's supposed to be a bad omen. So, you know, the book, or the movie rather, goes to this whole thing of she being possessed by his ghost, and it's this whole exorcism thing that goes on. And while I'm making the movie sound maybe kind of boring, it's actually really interesting, and I really rather enjoy it. But none of that happened in the book. I mean, some of it did, some of it didn't. In the book, she comes home and he does drop dead from basically the same circumstances. And then, you know, they go through a similar thing where they bury him and they try and forget about it. But there were so many differences between the book and the movie. I mean, I enjoyed the book, it was good, but I just feel like it was drawn out too much. And comparing it to the movie, which is what I was first exposed to, I think that it was drawn out, like I said, too much, and that too much was laid out. I think they could have easily just, dulled it back a bit. I don't know, almost feels like there was too much going on in the book with no real point to it. But that's kind of my thoughts. I mean, like I said, it wasn't bad. It was an okay book, but I definitely would prefer the movie to the book, just because it kind of cut to the point a lot faster than the book ever did. The book was a little too drawn out for me. So the book itself, while I enjoy the overall story and I enjoy the characters, I'd say for me was a 3 out of 5 stars, and I'll probably put that review up on Goodreads when I get a chance. But that's kind of where it left me feeling. Like, I mean, like I said, the story itself was okay. I enjoyed the characters and the overall premise of it, but because I felt it was drawn out too much, and the backstory and the history that I was hoping for was basically non-existent, really fell short for me. So that is kind of my thoughts on that. So yeah, and then I will do some more book reviews on the other ones that I have read very soon. So that was sort of my take on the book Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman, and I will read the prequel, and I might revisit this review and change my thoughts, but we'll see. But that's kind of how I feel at the moment. So thank you all so much for watching. I greatly appreciate you supporting my channel and checking this out. For those of you who are new to my channel, please be sure to give this a like and a thumbs up, and to share and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.